Please don't feel bad for missing your partner after a couple days of being away from them. Don't let anybody make you feel like that's like a negative thing. It's not.
Disney's Snow White remake was supposed to be a triumph, a grand return to the studio's golden roots, blending nostalgia with modern storytelling. Instead, it became one of the most talked about entertainment meltdowns in recent Hollywood history. What began as a bold reimagining of a beloved fairy tale turned into a tangled web of controversy, cultural backlash, and corporate confusion that exposed just how fragile the magic had become. When Disney announced in 2021 that it would bring Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs back to life in live action, expectations were sky high. This wasn't just another remake. It was the remake of the story that started it all, the film that built the Disney empire in 1937. Early concept art teased lush forests, dazzling costumes, and an emotional, updated tone. Executives believed they could have the best of both worlds, a story that honored tradition but still resonated with modern audiences who demanded progressive storytelling. The plan seemed foolproof until it wasn't. The casting of Rachel Zegler initially looked like a masterstroke. Fresh from her acclaimed performance in West Side Story, she embodied Disney's vision of a new generation of heroines, talented, outspoken, and unapologetically confident. She could sing, act, charm the press, and connect with younger audiences through social media. She was supposed to carry the torch that Emma Watson, Halle Bailey, and other modern Disney stars had lit. Strong, independent women redefined for a new era. On paper, she was perfect. In reality, she became the center of a storm that no one at Disney saw coming. The trouble began with her early press interviews. Zegler's remarks about the original 1937 classic, calling it outdated and emphasizing that her version would reject the idea of a love story, immediately set off alarm bells among fans. This time, she explained, Snow White doesn't dream of true love, she dreams of becoming a leader. What was intended as an empowering message came across to many as dismissive of the story's heart. Fans accused Disney of rewriting history to fit modern sensibilities instead of preserving the emotional simplicity that made Snow White timeless. For millions who grew up on the original, the charm wasn't in politics or power. It was in kindness, courage, and innocence. Then came the controversy that truly unraveled the project. When Disney revealed that Zegler, a Latina actress, would play a character described in the original as having skin as white as snow, online debates exploded. Supporters praised the casting as progressive and inclusive, while critics called it a betrayal of the source material. What might have been a moment of celebration for diversity turned into a cultural lightning rod. Disney once again found itself trapped in the very culture war it had tried to navigate so carefully. But the chaos didn't stop there. Actor Peter Dinklage, celebrated for his role in Game of Thrones, publicly condemned the remake, accusing Disney of hypocrisy for claiming to be progressive while still including dwarfs as characters. His comments put the studio in a difficult position. In an attempt to avoid perpetuating stereotypes, Disney reportedly reimagined the Seven Dwarfs as a group of diverse magical creatures, some human-sized, others entirely CGI. The decision, however, backfired spectacularly. Traditional fans accused Disney of erasing beloved characters who were central to the story's soul. Disability advocates expressed anger that real little person actors had been denied a rare and meaningful opportunity to perform in iconic roles. Instead of resolving the controversy, Disney had created a new one, a lose-lose situation in which every decision felt like an apology for the last. Behind the scenes, the production seemed to spiral. Reports surfaced of constant rewrites, shifting tones, and uncertainty about what message the film was even trying to send. Was it a feminist reimagining? A satire? A faithful remake? No one seemed to know, and as the confusion grew, so did the backlash. Online fan communities picked apart every leaked image and interview, dissecting every word Zegler said. Memes mocked the film before it even had a release date. What was once a symbol of wonder had become a running joke about how not to modernize a classic. The tragedy of Disney's Snow White wasn't just in its marketing missteps, it was in what the story came to represent. For many, it became proof that the studio had lost touch with its core magic, trading timeless storytelling for corporate messaging. Instead of enchanting its audience, Disney seemed to lecture them. The remake tried so hard to appeal to everyone that it forgot the simple truth that had made the 1937 original unforgettable. A good story doesn't need to prove its virtue. It just needs to make you believe in magic again. By the time the controversy reached full force, the damage was already done. What should have been Disney's proudest remake turned into an industry cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when art becomes a battlefield for ideology. Rachel Zegler, once hailed as Disney's next great star, became a polarizing figure caught between fans, critics, and the studio's own conflicting priorities. In the end, the Snow White remake wasn't just a film gone wrong. It was a reflection of Hollywood's growing identity crisis. A studio that once taught generations to wish upon a star had lost faith in its own storytelling. And as the backlash grew louder, one truth became painfully clear. When a company built on dreams stops believing in them, even the fairest story of all can fade into a nightmare. Disney's Snow White remake had already been wobbling under the weight of expectation and controversy, but the storm truly exploded when its lead actress, Rachel Zegler, began speaking candidly about the project. What was supposed to be a sleek, well-orchestrated publicity campaign quickly devolved into one of the most chaotic PR spirals Disney had ever faced. The studio had tried to walk a tightrope between modern progressivism and nostalgic tradition, but instead, it found itself dangling over a canyon of public backlash. From the start, Disney's plan had been straightforward: remake a timeless story, update it for the modern age, and let a confident new star carry the message. But as interviews rolled out and social media clips spread, it became clear that their messaging had slipped out of control. Zegler, instead of echoing the studio's rehearsed optimism, spoke with unfiltered honesty, a trait admirable in many actors, but disastrous in the world of corporate marketing. When asked about the original 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, she didn't hesitate to call it outdated and said that her version of Snow White wouldn't be dreaming about love or waiting for a prince to rescue her. She described the prince's role as creepy, joking that the story didn't exactly hold up by modern standards. For some, these comments were refreshing, an actress brave enough to modernize a fairy tale without fear of tradition. But for many, it was a slap in the face. Fans accused her of mocking the very story that had built Disney's legacy, and they flooded social media with criticism. Memes painted her as ungrateful, arrogant, or too woke to appreciate the timeless magic of the original film. The backlash spread like wildfire. YouTube commentators, film pundits, and social media personalities dissected every word she said. Fans who had grown up loving Disney's fairy tale era took offense at what they saw as open disdain for the company's founding story. Every new clip, every soundbite became a viral talking point, each one fueling the narrative that Disney had lost touch with its audience. What should have been a celebration of empowerment and progress turned into a lesson in how not to manage a franchise reboot. Inside Disney, executives were reportedly alarmed. The company has one of the most disciplined public relations machines in Hollywood, one designed to protect its brand at all costs. Actors are coached to stay on message, to smile through criticism, and to project positivity. Yet Zegler's interviews kept going off script. She wasn't afraid to push back against traditionalists or to question the company's own history. Her authenticity, admirable on a personal level, became a corporate nightmare. Disney had built its empire on the promise of magic and unity. Suddenly, its newest princess was dividing audiences. The situation escalated further when Zegler was booked for a daytime television appearance on The View. For Disney, it was a chance to reset the narrative in a friendly, controlled environment. The show's hosts were known for progressive discussions, and the studio hoped the conversation would help soften Zegler's image. Behind the scenes, PR handlers provided a list of safe topics. Avoid the dwarfs controversy, avoid criticism of classic Disney, emphasize the film's positive message. But as the cameras rolled, things didn't go as planned. Zegler reportedly clashed with the tone of the conversation, doubling down on her earlier comments about sexism in older Disney films and the need for stronger female roles. Tension filled the studio. According to leaks, producers scrambled to redirect the discussion, but Zegler wasn't interested in playing the polished corporate role. Her remarks grew sharper, the hosts tried to mediate, and the atmosphere turned uneasy. At one point, the crew allegedly cut to a commercial break early after heated words were exchanged off camera. The fallout was immediate. Rumors swirled online about Disney representatives stepping in to shut down the segment. Some reports claimed the actress and producers argued backstage. Others said the studio feared more negative headlines if she kept talking. Whatever the truth, the damage was done. Whatever the truth, the damage was done.
Very nervous, more because I know I'm going to be interacting with people.
The internet lit up again, not with excitement, but with ridicule. Clips from the appearance circulated widely, feeding the narrative that the Snow White remake had spiraled beyond saving. Meanwhile, audience interest plummeted. Early screenings reportedly drew disappointing turnout, with even younger Disney fans showing little enthusiasm. What should have been a guaranteed blockbuster was now a cultural punchline. Commentators quipped that wokeness had finally caught up with Disney, that in trying to appease every audience, the studio had alienated them all. In hindsight, the entire saga was a perfect storm of miscommunication, cultural tension, and corporate panic. Disney tried to modernize a masterpiece without understanding why people loved it in the first place. Zegler tried to be honest about her beliefs, but found herself in the crossfire of a studio desperate for control. By the time the dust settled, Snow White had become less of a fairy tale and more of a Hollywood parable. A warning that when authenticity collides with branding, the result can be disastrous. What was meant to symbolize a new era of inclusive storytelling ended up as a painful reminder: you can change the story, rewrite the script, and polish the message. But if you forget the magic that made people believe in the first place, even the fairest tale in the land can crumble to dust. Accounts of what happened that day vary, but nearly everyone agrees on one point. Rachel Zegler was quietly escorted off the set before her interview on The View could finish. The co-hosts, caught off guard, stumbled through an awkward transition to a filler topic, and within minutes, the live segment was over. For Disney, a company built on meticulous image control, the moment was catastrophic. What should have been a simple, upbeat publicity appearance had turned into a full-blown public relations nightmare. News of the debacle spread across the internet almost instantly. Within hours, social media was ablaze with speculation. Clips from the incomplete segment leaked, memes went viral, and gossip channels pounced on every rumor. Headlines didn't talk about Snow White's music, visuals, or message. They talked about Rachel Zegler. The actress's name trended for all the wrong reasons, and overnight, the film became synonymous with corporate chaos and cultural tension. Disney's PR machine snapped into action. Executives ordered a full-scale containment effort. Crisis teams were deployed, and Zegler, now facing online vitriol and reported threats, was assigned private security for upcoming appearances. Behind the scenes, a damage control task force was formed to manage what insiders described as the most unpredictable press tour in years. Variety soon reported that the actress had been paired with a dedicated social media strategist, a crisis management expert tasked with approving all her future posts, screening her remarks, and guiding her interactions online. But even this move created more controversy. To some fans, it looked like Disney was silencing its star. To others, it was evidence that the studio had lost control of its own message. Either way, it became another chapter in an unfolding spectacle that no amount of spin could fix. The controversy didn't just center on Zegler anymore. It had become a cultural flashpoint. Critics accused Disney of pushing woke politics at the expense of story and heart. Longtime fans lamented what they saw as a betrayal of the original film's spirit, while activists argued that modernization was overdue. The debate grew louder, more polarized, and more personal. Online communities dissected every rumor, every leaked still, every whispered piece of production gossip. At Disney headquarters in Burbank, tension was running high. Executives reportedly held emergency meetings almost daily. CEO Bob Iger was said to be furious that a film once considered a guaranteed hit had spiraled into one of the studio's worst PR disasters. Some insiders whispered that marketing budgets would be slashed, press events canceled, and future interviews heavily vetted, especially those involving Zegler. Others admitted privately that the film's reputation was beyond saving. Ironically, all the chaos only fueled more curiosity. Viewers who might not have paid attention before were now following every new development. Online forums filled with speculation, from alleged on-set feuds between Zegler and Gal Gadot to debates over the redesigned magical companions replacing the dwarfs. Every minor detail became headline fodder. Still, the real test came when Snow White finally hit theaters. Disney bet heavily that brand loyalty and family appeal would overcome the online noise. For decades, audiences had turned out for Disney fairy tales regardless of controversy. Surely nostalgia would win out again. But when the box office numbers arrived, the results were grim. The film limped through its opening weekend, earning far less than analysts predicted. Even longtime Disney fans, once reliable ticket buyers, stayed home. Many cited exhaustion with the studio's agenda-driven storytelling or disappointment in how the classic had been handled. Critics' reviews reflected that same split. A few praised the film's visual craftsmanship and Zegler's vocal talent, but most found it hollow. The reimagined story, stripped of romance, whimsy, and emotional warmth, left audiences unmoved. What had once been a tale about kindness, love, and hope had been transformed into a lecture about independence and identity, and the shift didn't land. One review summed it up bluntly: Disney forgot the magic. The studio that built its empire on wonder and imagination had delivered a film that felt more like damage control than storytelling. For many, Snow White became the cautionary tale of Hollywood's new era, a symbol of what happens when art gets lost in the politics of perception. By the end of its theatrical run, the movie's financial losses were undeniable. But the real wound wasn't on the balance sheet. It was to Disney's reputation. What should have been a celebration of legacy became a reminder that even the mightiest storytellers can lose their way when they stop listening to their audience. Disney didn't just endure a box office failure. It weathered one of the most catastrophic PR implosions in modern Hollywood history, a meltdown that rippled far beyond film critics and fans. Financial analysts, YouTubers, and cultural commentators alike dissected the Snow White disaster as if it were a case study in how corporate overreach and misplaced messaging can sink even the most iconic brand on earth. To some, it was yet another example of get woke, go broke. To others, it was the result of hollow corporate activism, a multi-million-dollar production that tried to stand for something without ever truly knowing what that something was. What made this fallout especially brutal was that Snow White was never just another movie. It carried the symbolic weight of being Disney's first princess, the one that started it all. Fans who had grown up enchanted by the 1937 original felt betrayed, not because the studio wanted progress, but because it seemed to mistake cynicism for empowerment. Instead of reimagining a fairy tale through care and creativity, Disney appeared to bulldoze its own legacy, as if embarrassed by the story that made it famous. Even audiences who initially supported diversity and modernization began to turn away, arguing that the adaptation felt more like a lecture than a story. The emotional core, innocence, kindness, and wonder, had been replaced by a checklist of slogans that rang hollow. As the film stumbled out of the gate, the public's patience quickly evaporated. Box office receipts plummeted, and the cultural autopsy began almost immediately. Critics, insiders, and fans all pointed fingers, and most of them pointed squarely at Rachel Zegler. Once hailed as a rising star with immense promise, Zegler suddenly became the lightning rod for a corporate crisis far bigger than herself. Her early press tour comments about the outdated nature of the original film and her dismissal of the prince as creepy became viral ammunition for detractors, who saw her as disrespectful and self-righteous. Overnight, Zegler went from Disney's golden girl to the internet's favorite target. But was the backlash fair? Some argued she was simply being honest, articulating a new generation's discomfort with old fairy tale tropes. Others countered that, once she signed on, she had a professional duty to help sell the film, not undermine it. A Hollywood contract, they said, isn't a debate club. It's a partnership in which image matters as much as performance. The debate became viciously polarized. One camp accused Disney of silencing a young woman for speaking her truth. The other accused her of biting the hand that fed her. And while fans clashed online, the film itself became collateral damage in a larger culture war. Inside the studio, frustration reportedly grew. Crew members, already worn from months of reshoots and creative rewrites, found themselves defending a product that even Disney executives seemed to lose confidence in. Some insiders whispered that Zegler's remarks weren't the sole cause of the collapse. The project had been doomed long before the first trailer dropped. Between Peter Dinklage's criticism of dwarf stereotypes, the studio's awkward pivot to magical forest companions, and the clumsy balancing act between inclusion and nostalgia, the entire production had become a house of cards. Zegler attempted to regain control of her narrative through social media. She posted messages of gratitude, spoke about activism, women's rights, and her love for storytelling. But each attempt to steer the conversation seemed only to fan the flames further. Her authenticity, once her greatest asset, now made her a symbol of everything critics accused Disney of being: self-righteous, overly political, and disconnected from its audience. For some, her activism inspired respect. For others, it was proof she was too ideological to carry a beloved fairy tale. The damage was done. Behind the scenes, tabloids claimed Disney quietly decided to distance itself from Zegler after the promotional cycle. Though no official statement ever surfaced, industry gossip suggested the studio would not likely cast her in future live-action roles. The whispers painted a picture of a young actress isolated by controversy, a promising career moment swallowed by forces far beyond her control. And then there was Gal Gadot, the star whose presence should have been a saving grace. As the evil queen, Gadot had the kind of gravitas, star power, and international appeal that could have anchored the film. Yet throughout the press tour, she remained conspicuously restrained, offering polite, rehearsed sound bites and avoiding the political firestorm entirely. Many speculated this was intentional, that Disney, desperate to contain the chaos, had quietly instructed Gadot to minimize her media exposure. Others believed Gadot herself chose silence, recognizing that any comment could be weaponized in the toxic online environment surrounding the film. Whatever the reason, her subdued presence only added to the perception that something was deeply wrong behind the scenes. Rumors of tension between Zegler and Gadot only made matters worse. Unverified reports circulated that the two had clashed over creative differences or ideological views. None of it was ever confirmed, but in the absence of clarity, speculation flourished. The press no longer focused on Snow White as a film. It became an ongoing drama, with cast dynamics and corporate politics as the main attraction. By the time Snow White limped into theaters, even Disney's loyal audience seemed fatigued. The studio had thrown hundreds of millions into a project that was supposed to be a guaranteed hit. Internal projections once forecasted a $500 million global haul, a safe, family-friendly return to form. Instead, it collapsed under its own ambition, leaving behind a trail of memes, outrage, and embarrassment. For CEO Bob Iger, the fallout was more than financial. It was existential. Disney's brand, once synonymous with timeless storytelling, now felt trapped between two worlds, one clinging to nostalgia, the other chasing cultural relevance. The company had tried to reinvent Snow White for the 21st century, but in doing so, it seemed to forget why the original worked in the first place. It wasn't about politics or progress, it was about heart, and no amount of modern messaging could replace that. In the end, Snow White became a cautionary tale, not just about filmmaking, but about authenticity, arrogance, and the peril of forgetting what made audiences believe in magic in the first place. During Disney's next investor call, CEO Bob Iger tried to steady the ship. He spoke calmly, downplaying the chaos surrounding Snow White and redirecting attention toward the company's upcoming projects: Marvel sequels, new Pixar releases, and the ever-reliable theme park business. But behind the corporate composure, insiders claimed the meltdown had rattled Disney to its core. The failure wasn't just financial, it was reputational. Rumors began circulating that senior leadership had been blindsided by just how explosive the backlash became. Some employees even whispered that internal meetings turned tense, with executives quietly debating whether to push Snow White onto Disney Plus far earlier than scheduled. A face-saving move to minimize losses before the negative buzz could further erode the brand. Even Disney-friendly media outlets, usually quick to defend the mouse, seemed hesitant this time. Entertainment journalists and cultural critics questioned whether Disney's magic formula, retelling beloved classics with a coat of modern polish, was finally wearing thin. Think pieces popped up in Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and across YouTube, dissecting the company's creative decline. Some accused Disney of cynically weaponizing girl power, swapping emotional depth for marketing slogans. Others lamented that the studio, once synonymous with wonder and warmth, had drifted into self-parody, a corporation more focused on managing optics than telling timeless stories. The fiasco sparked broader speculation that Disney might have to overhaul its entire reboot strategy. The era of safe remakes, once a financial goldmine, suddenly looked unsustainable. Every future project, from Hercules to Lilo and Stitch, was now under microscopic scrutiny. Could Disney still modernize classics without losing their soul? The question hung heavy in Hollywood's air. But while analysts debated strategy, the internet feasted on the drama. Social media became a battlefield of leaks, half-truths, and fan theories. Alleged insiders on Reddit and X, formerly Twitter, claimed to have witnessed shouting matches between studio reps and Rachel Zegler's team. Others swore that the Dwarfs controversy had caused a split within Disney's upper ranks. Some executives defending the inclusivity overhaul, others furious that the decision had turned into a PR disaster. The hashtag #I'mNotMySnowWhite began trending again, this time interlaced with calls for Disney to stop butchering classics. The campaign blended outrage with nostalgia, a cry from fans who felt that the company no longer respected the legacy it had built over nearly a century. Meanwhile, Ziegler's defenders fired back. They argued that she was being scapegoated for daring to challenge outdated tropes. They pointed out that Snow White's original story, written in the 1930s, reflected values far removed from today's world, and that an actress speaking openly about that shouldn't be punished for honesty. Yet, the more both sides fought online, the worse things got. Each new argument reignited the controversy, keeping Snow White in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Every neutral attempt to focus on the film's artistry, the costume design, the cinematography, the score, was drowned out by fresh waves of criticism. On YouTube, reaction videos exploded. On TikTok, clips from The View, where Zegler's offhand remarks had caused the audience to groan, went viral all over again. The meltdown became the story, eclipsing the movie itself. Amid the digital chaos, those who had poured years into making the film, the writers, animators, set designers, and costume artists, were almost invisible. Their work, however thoughtful or skillful, was buried beneath the avalanche of controversy. No one talked about the film's visual artistry or the orchestral reimagining of its classic songs. The only narrative that mattered was the one playing out online, a corporate fairy tale gone horribly wrong. And so, Snow White, once the foundation of Disney's empire, became a modern cautionary tale. It wasn't just a failed movie. It was a cultural mirror reflecting how quickly art can be consumed by outrage. What began as a story about purity and kindness had become a parable about ego, politics, and misplaced priorities. The innocence that once defined Snow White, her kindness, her faith in good, was lost in translation, replaced by studio spin and internet fury. In the end, the tragedy wasn't that Disney's Snow White failed. It was that it forgot what made the original endure. No amount of special effects or progressive slogans can replace sincerity. The dwarfs may have vanished into digital illusions, but what truly disappeared was the heart. The belief that a story, told simply and earnestly, can still make the world believe in magic. Make the world believe in magic.